Russell, and this is another episode of Beyond Instinct, and today we have Pip with us.
Hello.
Hello, Pip.
Hi.
Pip has been working within my sphere of business and in her own sphere of businesses for quite a few years now, and is in HR, people development and leadership. So I was just wondering if you could introduce yourself and why and how you got there.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm Pip Foulsham. I am a freelance HR people person, as I call myself, more commonly known as an HR consultant. But I often feel that word doesn't mean a lot. It can mean lots of different things. How I got there, I mean, we could probably spend half an hour talking about that. But in a nutshell, I did about 20 years employed in HR roles in corporate, in various industries, private and public sector, across lots of local businesses in Cambridgeshire as well. And then in 2019, I kind of made the jump into freelancing after a bit of fate and various things came my way. And then obviously 2020 was an interesting year with COVID. And it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm really enjoying it. Probably at the point now in year 6 of a bit more stability in my business. But I basically support small and medium businesses with solving people problems, so people issues, and then working on employee retention and people strategy.
Yeah, I think I've known you for nearly 6 years, actually.
Yeah, I think we started working probably was it during COVID, I think? Because we were in kind of networking groups, and I think we might have met online, I feel like.
I think so.
Well, so much time has passed. Time is just a really arbitrary concept after COVID, isn't it? You don't know how to meet people anymore. So, but yeah, we've kind of known each other for a while, and I've obviously been supporting some of your businesses on a very ad hoc basis. And yeah, it's been really interesting to see businesses develop as I've worked with them. That's the bit I love, is watching businesses change, as not just because of me, but as I come in and help open their eyes about people and people strategy. It's kind of interesting to see how people take that on board and use that to grow and change and develop their businesses.
Yeah, I think the reason that I resonate with you really well is because you're very looking forward of the HR as well. So I think sometimes HR can only get involved after the fire has already burnt.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously we've done some people strategies.
Yes.
And we've obviously been talking about leadership, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really good because it's almost like a fire prevention program in some ways.
That's good.
But also it gives you sustainability and growth for the company. Yeah.
I think it's very easy as small businesses to get caught up in the fire, in the very reactive people problems. And they're going to happen. It's the reality of running a business. You're going to get people issues that need dealing with. My dream for businesses is that you have the tools to equip you to deal with those quickly and efficiently so that they don't turn into a full-blown blaze. We can carry the analogy on. You can nip that fire in the bud really quickly, and what that gives you back is time. And time is really important in your business to invest in the more proactive, strategic people side of, people development, succession planning, talent management, employee retention, all these really positive things that we can do. And unfortunately, all too often we get caught up in the slightly more negative, reactive side of dealing with people problems. So if we can free you from that and minimize that, then it gives you this time back to invest in stuff that's much more valuable for your business and for the long term of your business as well.
Yeah, and I think that leads quite nicely into the fact of moving forward with people. And there's a big thing that's been around, that's a manager gets a manager role, but actually, do you know what? They were a technician.
Yes.
And they know nothing about managing.
Yes.
But because you're really good at the technician bit, I'm sure you'll be great.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot more awareness of that now. I think back 10, maybe 15 years ago, you would just get that job and then you would think, why am I doing this job? Or you would thrive it's a roulette of if that role's going to work.
I think sometimes, promoting for experience,
which is what I'm trying to say.
It's not uncommon. It happens, and it's not wrong. I think there's almost a step before we do that of understanding the person's passion and motivation. Not every technical person is going to want to move into a role where they're managing people, either purely or partly, because it's not what they trained to do. We're all like that. Not all of us are trained to I have, but not every manager that I work with or leader that I work with has dreamt of managing people their whole life. So some people are open to it but need support to get there. Some people don't have the fire inside of them. What you tend to find is their approach is very reactive, the minimum they need to do, and they're not looking forward. So it's not a problem, but I think understanding people's motivations and what they feel passionate and interested in is so important, because it informs so much of how they're going to operate in that role and how we can work with them. You know, I can come and do development with people, but if they're not actually interested and they don't want to do it, no amount of development or training is going to light that fire inside of them. So really understanding the motivation for things is the starting point for everything for me, and understanding what people are motivated by. You know, you can be an excellent technician. Actually, what you might want to do with the person that doesn't want to be a people manager is really invest in them technically, make them into a real technical specialist. That might be their real passion. Develop their technical skills so they're really invaluable to your business in that way, without putting them on a pedestal so that you struggle if they leave, but, you know, investing in them in that way so they feel valued, and not pushing them into, well, your next step has to be a people manager, because that's not always the case.
No, it's like an old linear process.
I think it's thinking more laterally about where are people's strengths, where could they benefit your business.
Yes. I think having the support as well is one of the things that we were just talking about before this, where I started a business, I gained more staff, I had no training on staff, they're just people, right? I can work them out. And I've fallen over many a times since then, but I've also made a lot of good decisions as well. But I think that as a company grows and we put people into this area of leadership that they want to go, so we've first discovered, is it for you? So, you know, we don't want a frog that's trying to swim. After that, what support can we put around them so they don't have to feel the pain of falling over like I did?
Yeah, and something I'm really looking at putting together when I get time, when I'm not dealing with some of those reactive issues with my clients, is when I worked in corporate, something I was passionate about is if someone became a manager or a team leader, I would actually sit down with them and just talk to them about, you know, here's the cycle of the year from a people perspective. Here are the things that you're going to get involved in. You know, you're going to be asked to make decisions on bonuses and salary increases and appraisals and people's performance, and almost saying to them, don't worry about it all at the moment. What we'll do is, as we go through the year, I'll coach and mentor you through the process so that you learn good habits. And, you know, there are other people you can learn from as well. And then really by the end of that 12-month cycle, you'll kind of understand your responsibilities. And then outside of that, there's this whole, how can you set a good example and be a good manager or leader as well? And what I'm looking at doing now is almost formalising that into kind of like a development program that clients can buy. Almost like if you're making someone a manager, you might want to put them on this program. So that I can spend time with those people. And a lot of it's increasing confidence, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, like you just said. And it's just saying to them, it isn't scary. You don't have to be frightened of it, but actually just knowing some of this stuff and knowing the language and the terminology and what things mean is the first hurdle. And then understanding a good approach to those things is kind of the next thing. So for me, a lot of it's about building this confidence in people so they don't make mistakes or do the wrong thing, or they have the confidence that they're taking the right action, whilst having me there as a backstop of, actually, I need to just chat this through with someone, bounce it off someone and help make a decision.
And I guess that is, instead of them just turning up every day and surprise, there's something else happening, like you've been through it so many times that there's a certain pattern to, like you said, yearly cycle. Something I probably haven't really given too much thought, but yeah, there probably is. In the winter, people are probably a little bit.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I suppose I'm thinking of, you know, almost the activities during the year that happen from a people perspective. So, you know, there'll be salary reviews, there'll be a bonus process, there'll be appraisals or performance management, whatever you call it. You know, there'll be those activities that happen through the year from a people perspective that managers, leaders are required to get involved in. And if you've never done it before, you know, what does an appraisal mean? How do you do an appraisal? Why are we doing it? What's the point of it? You know, you just get given a form and told, go and have a discussion with your person, like you said.
And that form sits on a desk and never gets seen again.
The danger with that is that people see it as an admin process.
Yes.
And the value for me is all in the conversation. The admin is the output of the process. And yes, we need to get it done sometime. We can make that easier for ourselves sometimes and not have 12 pages to fill in, but separate issue. But, you know, for me, the value is the conversation. So for me, the actual development and my work with people is helping them to understand that focus on the conversation, prepare for the conversation, make that a really good experience for the person, help them to own it, make it a two-way thing. The bit of paper is over here as an admin exercise, but that's not the focus of the process. So I think it's just educating and helping people to have that awareness of not forgetting that what a lot of what we do when we're managers and leaders, the value is in the people and the conversations and the relationship, not necessarily all these bits and bobs and processes and forms we have to fill in and upload to a system to satisfy someone's process. Yes, that's all great. And yes, to some extent that needs doing. But for me, the real value comes in the conversation with the person.
Yeah.
And the focus on that individual, that's where they're going to feel the value.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that, where I was coming from, when you said cycle, I thought you meant like seasons. Because you notice a difference in seasons. Like, we're now in spring, and people are so motivated in spring.
Right.
Like, just coming out of winter. And the team have actually explained that. They've gone, this weather's making me feel, I'm ready to go.
And what you can find is, in the winter, when it's tougher, people are struggling around Christmas. That can bring people can feel much more negative because it's darker. What I tend to find is the company sucks. So almost the financial year, the end of that performance year, people are doing end of year appraisals potentially. What you tend to find is there's almost a bit of an influx of grievances and complaints because people aren't happy with how that process has been dealt with.
Because it's linked to a bonus.
Linked something financial. The manager may not have dealt with it very well, so it's a surprise for them. So we tend to have these cycles of almost, you could predict it, what's going to happen because you can see where it's going. Again, for me, it's tracking back to the start of that, saying, how can you make the process great so you don't end up with that at the end of the year? You haven't got that reactive people problem.
Yes.
And actually, it's actually just a normal part of your business, these conversations that happen, and everyone knows what to expect.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, it's going to be raised early. It's not going to be jumped on you as a surprise. You're not going to end up with this raft of difficult stuff to end up with when you're busy. Start of a new financial year. Actually, it's just a normal cycle of what you do every month. It just is a continuous development process. So that for me is really important, moving people into that mindset rather than thinking I'm hamstrung by these really, difficult and time-consuming processes. That's I've got to make time to do my appraisals with my team. So I hear a lot, and I'm like,
we used to have
that's a problem for me because if you have to make time for it, it probably tells me you're not putting the value in that's needed, or that it's too cumbersome and it doesn't help you to do it in a way that's really effective. So I would actually look at your process and say, does this work for you? There's no legal requirement for appraisals, by the way. Sometimes it's required if you want to go for something like ISO or one of those accreditations. They require you to have something in place. You don't have to have something heavily cumbersome. You just have to have a process that is consistent rather across your business. So sometimes we can simplify, and I'm all about simplifying. A lot of what I do is go into businesses and say, do you really need that? Do you need that policy? Do you need that process? Or could you simplify and make it easier for yourself? Because commercially, again, it's about freeing up time. I'm all about this, freeing up time so you can do more value add people stuff than getting stuck in 16 pages of an appraisal form for 15 people.
That you do once a year, and then you bring it out again in a year's time and go, so we had 9 objectives. I haven't spoken to him about them at all year. Why haven't you hit them?
Exactly.
Which is where I've been before in other countries.
Exactly. And we're 10, 15 years beyond that now. That's a very old-fashioned model of what used to happen. We're in a completely different place, and I think we can modernise and simplify that to make everybody's lives easier and better. Get the value out and free up time as a result.
And make small shifts along the way versus all of a sudden at the end of the year we're miles off.
Yes.
So we can just keep it in line versus at the end of the year.
Just keep the conversation constant. That's it for me. So much of people issue stuff comes back to communication.
Yep.
Relationships. And for me, the more you can do to help yourself as a business leader or owner, then you're going to make your life easier in the long run. And that's really, sounds like common sense. A lot of my conversations are about really pointing out kind of the common sense of the situation. You don't have to make this as difficult as you're making it. Sometimes you can make it easier, and then try it, and this might be the outcome. And where we've done that, it's been again for me, sitting back and watching the difference it makes when we do that is really pleasing, because you're like, actually they're in a much better place now. They're not stuck with this cumbersome thing that everybody hates it. No one enjoys. People don't enjoy having the appraisal. The managers don't like doing it. It's not loved. So actually the question for me is, why are you doing it then? Don't do something that you hate. Ask how you can change it and make it better for yourself, or easier for yourself, or fun, nicer, better fit your culture, all of those things. We have this, because I've come from a corporate business, or I know someone who works in a corporate business and they have this. We all think
it must work.
We all think small businesses, I should have it. And I think that's always a real mistake. My question for people is always, why do you want it? What's it for? If you can't tell me why you're implementing something, it just tells me you want it because you think you need it. Yeah. But it needs to do something for you. It needs to be an output of the process. So my first question is often, there's just part that you need it for a minute. What's it for? Why do you need it? What purpose is it serving? If you can't answer that question, go, no, I think, and come back, and actually we might end up in a different place. You might not need that, but might want something else, or need something else. For me, it's just broadening people's thought process beyond they have it, so I should have it, because it's this, we shouldn't always do what we've always done.
It's not a real reason to have something.
No, I think, and being innovative is about not just following the herd, it's about doing something else. I'm not saying you don't have anything, but I'm saying don't necessarily just have what everyone else has because you think you should.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's a pointless exercise that just, and I always said, annoys everybody, which I guess
you won't give it value.
And the staff, I remember when I used to get one-to-ones, and we used to go, we're meant to have a one-to-ones. It almost became a joke because you're just talking about stuff that there's no actions out the back of it, and then you have it again in the next year.
Yes.
And that's creates a negative cycle. So it was obviously brought in years ago as a good thing, which now is just seen as what you said earlier, admin. It's seen as admin. It's not seen as growth. It's not seen as moving forward or anything around that. It's just seen as admin, which we don't want. So.
No, and I think if you're doing one-to-ones and you're not, again, putting value on those, you're not going to them with an agenda, or you're just saying, well, what do you want to talk about?
Fill the box,
I think, again, it's just this, well, it's in my diary, what do you want to talk about? And sometimes that can be helpful to have as an open thing, but I think a lot of people do just want to touch, that's dedicated time with their manager. So for me, I almost encourage the employee to come with an agenda. This is your time with me. What do you want to talk about? And sometimes it's tactical work stuff. I want to ask you about this work thing. Sometimes it's, I want to talk about my career development. Sometimes it's, I'm really struggling. I'm just in a bad place at the moment. It's an open diary invite, but I'd always encourage them to come with 3 or 4 points that they want to talk through. And that just means that the hour or whatever isn't just a ramble.
Yeah.
It has a structure to it. You leave with something tangible. Yeah. Some actions are agreed. That's this continuous development cycle. There is a purpose for doing it, and something comes from doing it. And then next month, you check back and say, okay, where are you now with that thing we were talking about last month? So what's changed for you? So that my head is always about this. We need to be seeing progress.
Maintenance as well. Yeah. Versus once a year when it's broken.
Absolutely. Yeah. Constant. Yeah.
So with that in mind, obviously we were going to be talking about leadership.
Yes.
And one thing on leadership that we've just been talking about, and I talk about a lot, and you talk about a lot, is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So do you want to lead into that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a phrase that's been around a long time, and it's one of these HRE, I don't know if it's HRE, leadership phrases, which you hear all the time. And I guess we ask, what does it mean? You mentioned before we came on, sometimes people think it's about being sympathetic or having feelings for them. For me, it's about a way of functioning where you understand yourself and how you operate and what triggers and motivates you to behave in the ways you behave. But also you also look at other people in your team and you understand what motivates them. So it's a massive topic. We can talk about it all day long. But for me, the starting point of it is, and if there are formal definitions online, the first pillar of it is this self-awareness. So who am I? What am I like? How do I develop? And in my HR career, even before we talked about emotional intelligence, we did, we've always done, we call it kind of personality profiling, which sounds a bit like you're on a psychologist's couch. It's not like that. It's, you're literally going and asking a questionnaire, and what you do get kind of put into a box, if you like, of a personality type. It doesn't mean you're that type forever. You can change. And often you do as your career develops. Mine has changed slightly over time. Broadly, it's the same. But I found those exercises really important because actually it does hold the mirror up to you in terms of what you're like. And I mean that in a positive and opportunities where, actually the things that are great about you, where you really shine and you answer questions about yourself. So you should, in the report, you should identify yourself. So it can be really helpful to say, this is where I'm great. This is where I really function highly. But probably the more important bit is actually, where am I not? So where are my blind spots? Where do I not function so well? And when might I need help and support? Or when might I need somebody who has those things? So in my example, we were talking earlier, attention to detail is low on my personality profile. And I know that about myself, and I'm a quadruple checker of things when I'm working on numbers and detail, and I find it hard to sit and do a policy. I can't sit for 3 hours and write a policy. That is tough for me because it's a lot. I'm a bit of a butterfly brain. I like to do lots of things all at once, and I'll dip in and out and do 20-minute bursts. It's much better for me. But when it's finished, I have to sit and do the check because I know that I might have, in that 20-minute flitting, I might have missed something. But actually, when I was in corporate, working alongside those people who were either the opposite or had those high attention to detail, often finance people, for me, were very beneficial because, they were maybe more introverted. I don't want to stereotype anyone. They were maybe more introverted, definitely about the numbers, probably more likely to be about the detail. I was more of a social animal, not so interested in the numbers as an HR person, and very much not interested in the detail. So actually finding people that help plug those areas, can be beneficial on both sides. So the first bit's understanding you, and then it's almost looking at other people and saying, okay, how might your personality style benefit me? What could it do to help me? Equally, how might it cause conflict and clash? Because sometimes the people who are very opposite to you are hard to understand. So some of it's acknowledging they're not wrong because they're the opposite to you or different to you. They are different. And it's almost understanding that difference and appreciating the difference of where the value comes. So you can't sit down and say, you're not organised enough. That's wrong. It's that's not how they're motivated. Some people, if you set me a deadline, I'll do 75% of it the minute you set me it, and then I'll finish it 3 days before and you'll have it early. Because that's just how I like to work. That's my preference.
I'll do 95% of it 10 minutes before it's due.
Right. And for me, working with someone like that in the old days, before I understood this, that would stress me out because I need to see the progress. What's happening with it? Why aren't you doing it? You need to have, I would have done half of it by now and you haven't done any of it. And some of it's going, you're not wrong because you get it done. As long as you get it done and it's of good quality, your approach is not wrong. My approach is not wrong. We both get it done. We both approach it very differently. And I think what I hear a lot, and people that come to me with issues is, they're not performing because they don't do it like this. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean it's wrong necessarily. The question is, are they delivering? And, after COVID, we're now in this world of managing by results rather than presenteeism. Are they delivering what they should be delivering? Actually, the question is always, does it matter how they do it? Does it matter if they do it in 5 hours or 10 minutes? As long as it's done and the quality is there.
Doesn't matter,
So this idea of emotional intelligence just comes back to, understanding who we are and being comfortable with it, even the bits we might not like about ourselves so much, which is sometimes a tough read.
It is tough.
Sometimes a tough read. But actually acknowledging that that's about, the power for me has been almost sharing the report that you get off the back of this and saying, this is who I am. If my clients are doing, often for team building days, one of the first things I'll recommend is they use one of these models, whether it's this one or there's various different ones. But there are people out there who are trying to facilitate these activities, and they'll come in and run team activities using personality thing as a model underneath it. And it's really powerful because you see people revert to type. There were set activities to do as teams, and you really see their person. In the morning we explore their stars and we get to know who people are. In the afternoon they'll do team activities, and it's amazing how people revert to type in the team activity. You'd be like, wow, I'm absolutely seeing that about you. Sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's, wow, that's not so healthy to see. And then there's this reflection afterwards. So it can be really powerful to almost have that sort of step back and that observing of other people, bearing in mind who you are as well, and kind of looking at it as a leader, having that inquisitiveness about, well, I'm like this, and who are you, and what's that informing me about what's going on, or how you're behaving, or what's happening.
Yeah, I think it's from what I'm hearing, I think it's you're running what you're hearing, just not through your own self all the time, because that would be one set of rules.
Yes.
And what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand, okay, this is how I operate. This is what I would think, and this is what I would do. This person's doing something that way. And on face value, it might be, that's crazy.
Yes.
How could you get to that? But it's about holding back and going, okay, let's pause Michael Russell of how he operates. We know X operates like that. And it's about not having face value and actually having a thought process or an intelligence, as we say, about the understanding of somebody operating differently to you, and you being open enough to have the awareness that that's okay. Because I think that sometimes, and I will probably be guilty of this, and I think most small businesses have been guilty of this, they want more of them.
Yes.
They want a lot more of them.
Yes.
And then what happens is people come in that are not like them, they don't get it, and at the beginning when they're learning, they don't hang around. Or they do get another one of them, and then there's a lot of conflict involved, because actually you don't want another one of you.
Too similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, the emotional intelligence piece is, I always see it as the fact of like you're picking up on what people are saying, but you're also picking up on non-verbals. You're constantly in a state of curiosity versus judgment. And sometimes that's really hard because you are you. And some people go, we don't judge. I think everybody judges. It's just that if you say you don't judge, it means you don't speak it out into the world.
Well, and also it's not saying you can't judge, but it's almost, I liked what you said there. It is stopping yourself and going, okay, why am I judging it to be like that?
Yeah.
Is it because...
And diagnosing it.
Yeah. Is it...
is it genuine?
It's not that knee-jerk reaction. Or is it's wrong. You're going, okay, what's going on for me? And sometimes it will be wrong. Once you do the analysis, it might be approaching the task completely wrong. Sometimes you could go, okay, well, they're not doing it wrong. They're just doing it differently to how I would do it. And there's a freedom in kind of relinquishing that fixed mindset. It needs to be done and it must be done like this. That's very, like morality, controlling. It's culturally, that's hard for people, particularly if you're not wired like that. Having to work in that environment where, you must do it how your boss says in a particular way. If that's not your preference, you're going to find that very difficult and frustrating. So by understanding that the person needs a bit more latitude and freedom to decide how they do something, you might say to them, well, here's what I'd like you to do. Up to you how you do it. If you establish that they will thrive on that. For other people, they could not think of anything worse, and they want the clear instructions because they need a lot of structure. So again, we're in a world now, and I think particularly following COVID, where leadership and management is much more individualistic. We're not just saying, here's how I lead and deal with it. And this is where the emotional intelligence comes in. We're in a world where it's more kind of diagnostic and saying, okay, who have I got? What are they like? What am I like? What are our preferences? How do we all operate? What don't we like? What would we find hard? And actually, if you look at the whole team, almost where are the gaps? Do we have, maybe we have no one who's good with attention to detail. Maybe just that's the way we've recruited. Right? It's not his fault. But that's a huge gap for us. Actually, what we're going to do about that? Who's going to plug that gap? Or do we need to recruit someone who's wired like that?
And I think this is that people strategy that we were talking about. So I think, again, the trap you fall into, I'm talking right at the beginning of businesses, is you tend to hire people you like.
Yes.
And that's great whilst you like them, but then actually they can't do the job sometimes that you've hired them for because you like them.
Yeah.
And then you end up in this really weird zone that I ended up in the beginning. I did with only 2 members of staff where I loved them, but they couldn't do what I hired them for. And really, I've naively hired them because we're a good personality match versus a skill set.
Equally, that is not wrong. I think a lot of small businesses will do that because when you're small, you just need people to get stuck in. Right?
And it did work for a long time.
I think
but eventually, as the business grew,
no longer fit for purpose.
Because they were a great all-rounder and they were driven by passion versus actually we need a really specific skill set now, then that's where I think we ended up in a situation where it didn't fit.
Well, and selfishly, from my perspective, what I find is the last thing that small businesses will take on is HR. So we arrive at the party once you've recruited your 8 people. And of course, it's no longer fit for purpose because some of those people have been with you since the start. And of course, now you've got some people issues potentially that you need to sort out. And of course, we're rocking up the point that it's all sort of imploding a bit and it's a bit of a mess. So selfishly, the call I would give to small businesses is early, when you're beginning to recruit people, or even before you're thinking about doing it, have to take an HR consultant on, but maybe have a conversation with someone to say, what are things, again, this emotional intelligence, what are the things that I need to be self-aware of, think about before I do this? Because I don't think it's wrong to say I've recruited this person because I like them, but there is an element of you need to have that, where's the business going to be in 3 to 5 years' time? And are these people going to be coming on that journey with me? Or are they a 2-year hire? And then, what can I make some decisions? Bottom line, you can always restructure and sort it out, but it's much better if you...
It's disruption in time.
If you've thought about that, and it's the strategic mindset, isn't it? You've thought about that as a business leader, as a leadership behaviour, to think things through in advance rather than do it and deal with it later, which is much more reactive. I can work with people in both ways, but my preference is it's much nicer to turn up and almost coach people through the change rather than deal with a problem of a leader or manager say to me that this person isn't performing anymore. It's like, well, actually, I don't know if that's the problem. The problem is they were right for you 3 years ago. You're kind of not right for each other now because the business has changed and they're no longer kind of right for what you need. That doesn't mean they're not performing. It just means they don't quite fit where you need them to fit.
Some people love being in a startup. They love it because it's a great, exciting, loads of stuff going on. But if you try to put them into a processed business, it'd be very hard. Very, very hard. And I think that, getting somebody in up front and just having a conversation doesn't even have to be a massive retainer. Just having a conversation of, where are you going? Okay, right. Let's take the people today that are able to come with us versus the people that can do today. Because it's just misery and upset for both of you a year down the line. It's not good for anybody. Well,
a kind of understanding, what is your culture? What do you want it to be? Because a lot of small businesses won't define that up front. They'll just, it is what it is, right? We'll just muck in and get it done. Of course.
We just get stuff done.
JFDI, it's JFDI, isn't it? Just get it done. And that's totally fine. And that is what happens. But even just having a thought of like, what might we be growing into is a really good thing to do. Even if you haven't quite decided it, you might need someone to come in and do an exercise with you to kind of qualify that and pin that down. But just that, a little bit of someone asking you these questions. And I often say to people, I'm asking you questions. I don't necessarily want the answer today, but these are things that I'll leave you with. You need to think about it. Because if you've thought about it, that's going to put you in a better position. You might not have the answer for 2 years, by the way, but you've thought about it. And it's just this considered approach. I think coming back to the emotional intelligence, it's this, you said, you stop and consider before you act. And I think a lot of it is about this. You're not just doing what you'd always do. You go, okay, why am I thinking that? What am I doing now? What's going on? Where might I need to go? And I think it's, as small business owners, I think we often don't have time. Because things are just happening. And we're firefighting and chasing our tail a lot. And I think sometimes it's just building that time in to say, I'm just going to have 2 hours or half a day where I just go in and think about my business. If it helps you to book someone to come and sit with you to do that, I think when we had our people strategy session, it was actually good for you because I think the start of the discussion was not where we ended up. It was not where we ended up.
It's all about the future, so of course I love it.
Yes.
But
I was surprised because, in my head, you've got a very clear view of what you wanted to do. And actually, just with me asking you questions, we sort of ended up.
I think I underestimated resource, if I thought about it, if we feed back to it, is I was talking about where I was going to be. And you were like, okay, so that's great. Who's doing all this? And I was like, yeah. And it was a really obvious thing to me. The second you said it, it was really obvious. But at the time, I think it's, you have people that come in to do a role, and then you have people that come in to manage people that do a role, and then you have people that come in that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that sometimes, especially as a younger entrepreneur that was young in the game, I think that I knew where I was going so clearly, and I'll just figure it out anyway, which does work, but it's a painful journey. And it works
for you, but that doesn't necessarily really work for everybody who's on the journey with you. Some people need more clarity than maybe you can provide.
Correct.
You know roughly where you're going to end up, but actually people need you to fit in the detail of the steps along the way sometimes. So I think, again, this is about understanding that's who you are, but actually it might be you might need someone to work with you or as part of your team who can be the person that fills in those steps. If that's not your preference or you don't want to be doing that, you want to be the visionary up the front doing here's where we're going in 5 years. That's great. A lot of small businesses need more of that, if I'm honest. A lot of small businesses are a bit more short-termist. Here's what we're doing for the next 6-12 months and let's just do that. They're not thinking 3-5 years ahead. Or they can't get that far because, investment or materials, or they just don't have the ability to forecast that far ahead. But for someone with your personality style, it might help you to have someone who can bring a bit more structure to people, because there are going to be people in your team who need that, whose preferences for that.
Yes, and I think we've somewhat done that now. I mean, I'm talking about ages ago, but we've done that now, and we have tried to meet people at their level. I think it's not always easy to get it 100% right, but I think that as long as you're trying and you're constantly evolving and reviewing of good and bad. So that person took that really well. That was good, and it was a good thing to take. Or that conversation didn't go right. How did that happen?
This is part of your emotional intelligence, isn't it? It's not just doing and going, oh well, that's done.
Yeah,
you are having that reflection time and that awareness of, okay, that conversation didn't go so well. So why was that? Right. I was expecting it to be okay. Why was that? Who are they? Did I not sort of approach the message in the right way? Did I not present it? We were talking, some people need a gentle approach. Some people might need maybe a firmer approach. It depends who you're dealing with. And really, it's almost thinking before you get to the conversation, how am I going to approach this? And even when you plan, sometimes it doesn't quite go as you thought it would. So it's just coming away afterwards and doing that self-reflection and self-awareness of, okay, what can I take from this? What can I learn for the future? Kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it can be I don't want people to think this is, we're talking about negative conversations with people, because HR unfortunately has that feeling around.
I wish it didn't. But
so
it
do
does,
I. But, even positive things, like I've delivered things which I consider to be really positive. And then the review I've got is, all the feedback is, I'm thinking, that's weird. I thought that'd go really well.
But equally, it might be something that you're super excited about, but for whatever reason, you haven't ignited the passion in the people, or they haven't gone on that journey of it being exciting. So just present it to them as, this is an exciting thing, and you can't make someone feel excited about something. So again, it's what could you take about involving them more in the process of designing it or, putting it together, rather than just presenting it as, this is exciting. Because we can all say to someone, this is exciting.
Yeah.
That's a very subjective thing. What do you find exciting is not what I find exciting.
Like delayed excitement, I found out the other day. Well. So like some people, like Tim, who works with us, he is a thinker. So we'll talk about something and I'll be really excited about it. And he'll be like, okay. And I'm thinking,
nothing.
I know, and I'm thinking, what? And then 3 days later, he'll be like, yeah, that's a really good idea. I'm really enthused about it. And it's emotional intelligence, understanding how people work. I think I'm really vocal about it. So I will now say to somebody like Tim, I'll go, look, Tim, I think it's a really good idea. I'm expecting you to think it's a really good idea in 3 weeks' time. Right? in a jokey way, but I'm just really stating the obvious.
But you're acknowledging his need for reflection.
We're different.
And I think that's really key. I'm a reflector. I will advise people of things and then be like, I just want to go away and ponder it. Because there is often no right answer in HR. Options about what we do, but we deal with the grey. We're not in a black and white world all the time. So sometimes I just need to go away and ponder it, because equally each client is different, their culture is different, the risk they want to take is different. So sometimes for me it's about, I just need to go away and either I need to learn more about it so that I feel I've got enough knowledge, or I need to feel comfortable with the advice I'm giving you to know it fits your culture and your business, because what's right for you might not be right for another client. And I've probably got better at not reflecting so much, because you can go round.
Yeah, you don't want to get stuck in it.
You have to have enough knowledge to go, I feel comfortable to make a decision. But and a lot of the stuff that is brought to me is similar kind of things now, so I can be quite practical and say to people, okay, I've had similar things to this, can't hear your options. But I think for me it's I don't want to be the person that decides. So I'm very much, teaching people that emotional intelligence of, here are your options. What feels comfortable to you? And it's sometimes sitting in that uncomfortableness of none of them particularly feel comfortable, but I'm going to do this one. And okay, I practically coach you through it. And sometimes it's just working with the manager or the leader that I'm working with to develop their emotional intelligence as they move through that process. A lot of people see people processes as very rigid, very cumbersome, time consuming, bit of a hassle, if I'm perfectly honest. You really have to do this. Yes, you do legally, but equally we can agree strategies around it to help you and to help the person as well, because there's always two people involved in these situations. And sometimes it's about getting that manager to do that step back that we talked about earlier. If you were on the receiving end of this, how would you want this to go? It's often what I say to managers. Yes, you may be having issues with that person and you don't see a future for them in your business, which is really unfortunate. I hate when people are in that position. But actually, if you were on a receiving end of this process, how would you feel when you're going through it? Whether it's, redundancy or a dismissal or different things, it doesn't always have to be a negative, nasty thing, but actually we can treat people in a respectful way as we go through it. And sometimes just putting people in their position, saying, you need to think about you on the receiving end. Would that feel good to you? And sometimes that's my job. But we just have to be emotionally intelligent and just be self-aware to go, is that how you really want to approach this?
I think with the view of emotional intelligence, obviously, end of every podcast, we try and have some practical advice for people. I think for me, one of my things that I've learned and had people around like yourself that have helped me is that emotional intelligence piece of pause, reflect. What does it really mean? I don't think I was ever that person just can't do it. I would always sort of be curious because it's just my nature. But I think I've developed it a lot further because I think I could have been accused at the beginning of seeing everything through my eyes. And now I try and stop. Still sometimes may get it wrong. But the majority of the times I stop and I go, okay, what's going on here? Why was that received that way? Why is this happening? Why? So for me, I think that's really helped because otherwise you've got a limit, I believe, of how you can manage and who you can manage. And I think that if you have a limit of, I need a lot of people that do X and they just do X and they don't talk or they don't put their hand up or nothing changes, you're either looking for robots or you're going to be running through a lot of people trying to find that person.
Or you'll be micromanaging.
One of those three.
Not necessarily where anyone
and some companies, I won't go on a tangent, some companies, the micromanagement works. Like for people that just want temp jobs, part-time jobs during university, and they just want to go to a job, they don't want to think about it, they want to do it and then go back to their studies or whatever they're doing.
In a heavily regulated industries, you might have to have it to make sure that you meet the
and some people fit that thing. So we were saying earlier, some people want to know, this is what you've got to do, this is when you've got to do it by, and this is how it needs to look, and they love that. But it's not for everybody. So again, it goes back to emotional intelligence of working out, who is this person? This is the role. Does it fit? Can we adapt it? Can we make it work for them? Just quickly, actually, I just want to slip in. Is there a scenario where a certain personality type doesn't fit a certain role? Or can people be adaptive?
Oh, God. I mean, that's
a big question for a quick
one, isn't it? I would say, yes, there are absolutely situations where certain personality types don't suit job roles. I think if you tried to put me into a finance position, that would be a mistake because my attention to detail is low and I'm not a numbers person, right? So
I guess you'd be self-aware quite quickly.
I would know that, and I would try my hardest to develop what was needed. But ultimately, there is a limit to my ability in that sense. So most people aren't going to pick a job that's completely not suited to them, but some people don't know. Right? So yes, I think there are personality types that aren't suited to certain jobs. I can't give you a list of them here. Are those skills adaptable? I think that's a proper HR it depends answer. It really depends on the person. And I think that comes back to the personality type in terms of being flexible or rigid. You talked about adaptability this morning. I think if people are open to change and development and have that thought process where they love learning, being uncomfortable and not knowing everything, those are the people who are probably more adaptable. If you're working with those people who like to be told what to do exactly by when and how, they're probably a more fixed personality type. And it's hard. It's probably harder to develop those kinds of people because they don't have the inquisitiveness and the curiosity that we talked about here necessarily to what, and or the desire maybe to be more flexible and learn different things. So it's very hard to give a precise answer on it, but there is latitude to, and our personality styles change. So as that's a really good point. We do change. Do we change completely? No. There's 4 letters in these personality styles. I think I've changed one of my letters, which was on the cusp of a sort of 100% range. I think I was sitting around 40-ish%, and I flipped over to the other side of the line, if you like.
Yeah, I think you could probably flex a little bit.
And that's probably just as my career's developed and how I've worked with people. I think it was my thinking and feeling that changed. So whereas I was much more sort of logical, you follow the process. Probably now I'm freelance and I've got 25 years experience, I'm more intuitive. Like what feels right. I said, my reflection, what feels the right advice to give to this person? What's the right option for this person in their culture? It's more of a gut instinct than because I know the thinking bit, I know the process. Don't just go and check that, because I've learned that through my career. A lot of it is what's the right solution for this business, which is much more intuitive. It's more of a feeling decision. So that's the change that's happened for me. But all of my other letters, the strength of them may have changed over time, but they're pretty much the same. So inherently, I don't think we change hugely, but we've got the propensity to change elements.
But I think it's probably the desire, which is what we were saying. So I think I'm now answering the question that I asked, but along the lines of desire. So even if my personality type fitted X, but I wanted to do Y and I really wanted to do it, I think you would do it because you'd adapt and learn.
Potentially. Or you might not
have, you try at least
have
to
the
move
bravery
back.
Or you're just not ready for it, or you're not mature, you haven't got the skills and experience and the backing behind you. You've got the financial means to do it. There's lots of circumstances around it. Just because you've got the desire probably isn't enough. You need desire and motivation and the ability and the support around you. There's lots of things you need to make that happen. Some people are going to be brave enough to think, I'll just do it and see what happens. I think those people are quite rare because I think people have bills to pay, houses to pay for, food to buy, children to raise, support. The practicalities of life are a whole other layer that influence a lot of those decisions. And that's often what can hold people back because it's just a practical element of your life. If you can't afford to live.
Practicality of life. That's an interesting one. Maybe that's another whole podcast.
Possibly.
So, in the view of practical advice, sorry about my curveball question.
Fine. Threw me a bit. I don't know if I answered it.
No, that's fine. So, you were going to talk about, I call it like a psychographic test.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about, this self-awareness of understanding who you are and who other people are. So a great way to start is to do one of these, they're called psychometrics, psychometric assessment. So you're not sitting with someone, they're not analysing you in a room on a couch. It's an online questionnaire. There are various models out there. There's things called Colour Insights. There's one called DISC. A very old one is called Myers-Briggs, which was to psychologists.
I think that was the original,
a lot of the models are based on the Myers-Briggs psychology behind it. But they all come out with different outputs. Some of them have colours, some of them have personality types, some of them, the Myers-Briggs was just letters, and you have 16 of them. But there's a free version online. So in terms of value for money, you can do a free version online as a starting point as part of this understanding who you are. That's step number 1. So if you go to 16personalities.com, you can create an account and just work through the questionnaire. It doesn't take very long, probably 10 minutes of your life. And what you should get at the end of it is a report that represents you. You should read it and identify yourself. Obviously, if it doesn't, you can do it again. And it will talk you through the bits where you thrive, also your blind spots or development areas. It even gives you typical careers for those kinds of personalities. It gives you famous people with the same personalities.
That's what
Taylor Swift is my personality style, which I'm loving.
I'm Einstein, by the way.
Are you? Okay.
You can imagine I love that.
Mine's not quite so highbrow, but okay. I'll take it. So it's quite fun, but then what you can also do if you are a leader is potentially roll it out with your team, and then you get this really clear picture of who are you and who have you got, maybe where are some of those gaps that we talked about earlier. And that might help you with some resourcing decisions, or at least open a discussion of, okay, no one's particularly high on attention to detail, but actually you're the highest. Do you enjoy that? Is that something you want to develop? You know, it might be that person has an interest in it and they're just not particularly strong on it, but it might be one of their strengths. So so I'd recommend you go and do that. The value that you would then do is use that activity to probably do some sort of team activity with it. So I think doing it in isolation is fine. And it's then almost talking to someone and understanding how can you use that information to help your business. And that's where I can help with that. I can refer you to people that run those kind of team activities. I can certainly come in and talk about how you can use the information you've gathered to benefit your business. But if nothing else, it's good as a fun, in inverted commas, activity to see who we are.
Yeah, and it gives self-awareness. So it gives you your starting block, because something I've done, I've done 16 personalities. I admitted earlier that I quite like mine. And I redid it and I was nervous that it would change, but it hasn't.
You just want to be Einstein, don't you?
I think that's Isaac Newton on there as well. So that's quite a cool profile. And I did it genuinely, I think 3 times now, and I've come up the same, which is nice. Although my disc, when I redid it, had changed. So they must analyse different things.
Yeah, my first Myers-Briggs to my 16 personalities, to say one letter changed, but my broad personality style is it's that thinking and feeling element flipped for me, and that's just part of.
But I think the amount of business owners and leaders and people that haven't done that is quite high, and it's quite novel to me.
A lot of small business owners have never. I obviously came across it when I was working in corporate. I think if you worked in a big organisation to do it quite often. If you've only worked in small businesses or been a business owner, you're just not aware of it. So for me, it's some of this, I'm bringing some of my corporate experience into small businesses. And saying, no reason it can't help and work for you. I just think it's, if you're willing to do it and then also willing to share your with your team, I think there's a power in that to say, I'm actually willing to sort of open up even the bits of me that maybe I'm not so keen on sharing. I'm willing to share those. That's a proper leadership skill for me. We're all human beings. We all have stuff we're not so great at, right? And if we're willing to sit and say, I'm not perfect, I think it's a powerhouse move for your team to see that you're willing to do that and that you're openly acknowledging that, and that they might be able to help you to plug some of those gaps or deal with some of those issues that you find, and then understanding who they are. I just think I'm interested in people and human behavior. So for me, it's a fascinating activity. If someone says they've done a personality profile, I'm like, what are you?
Yes, right.
What are you? It's my first question. Because I think
do you try and guess it before they do it? I've jumped into that side.
It's very common to try and do that. You absolutely have to stop yourself from doing it.
I've got it wrong quite a few times, but I have got it right quite a few times.
With some of the letters, introvert and extrovert, it's often quite easy to tell. Because
I only guess the actual colour. I'm not as clever as to get the actual letters.
I go into try and figure out all of the elements.
Oh well, no.
I've the same as you. I've completely. It depends. If I don't know people very well, they'll say to me, "Oh, guess what? Oh, that's quite hard because I don't know you." Often, if I've got to know people after quite a lot of time, I can really be quite a bit more accurate. But I always try and stop myself doing it anyway because people surprise us.
Well, we've got a guy in the office that he did it, and I was really shocked by the result. And then he's been here for quite a good amount of time, and he redid it about 2 years later. And I said, "Look, let's just redo this because I still can't
believe it."
Same result again. And I was like, I can't believe it. And I really try and match how it works, and I think that you have to really look at it, and then you're like, okay, you can see how this shows up, but it's just a bit subtle.
I think the other thing you have to be aware of with all of, and if you do one of these activities as a team, what you get told is, we all have a profile. That doesn't mean we can't act against our preferences. So for me, I can do detail. Is it my preference? Absolutely not. Yeah. But if I have to sit and write a policy or do some spreadsheet stuff, I'll do it. I can do it. What I have to do is push all of my energy up. It's a lot of energy for me to do that. Equally with an introvert, if you said, go on stage and sing a song, they'd be thinking, whoa, and that's going to use all of it. The minute they finish doing that, they'll go home and sleep for a week. Whereas for me, I'm in a band, no problem. Yep. Sure. Of course I'll go and do that because I get my energy from doing that activity. It actually fills my energy up and makes me feel more energetic. For an introvert, they'll do it and go, that's all I've got. So that's what you have to bear in mind is we're all in these boxes, but that doesn't mean we can't do the opposite.
It's like the flex profile. I think discs do a actual profile and an adaptive profile.
Yes.
So I think when I did mine, it came up with mainly blue when I first did it. My adaptive was yellow-red. So I guess that's taken all of my energy to be yellow-red. And at the end of the day, that's probably why I was knackered.
So your natural preference is one thing.
Yeah.
It's really good to know that. But you can get people who absolutely what they present at work is because they have to for their job. You know, they might have to be on.
Yeah, if I turned up at work.
You get introverts as business leaders who are, you know, I think like Steve Jobs and some of the Apple people were introverts. You know, they were up there with microphones of people trying at their names and they're introverts. And you're thinking, well, that's a bit of a sort of antithesis for me of what I would think you'd do. But they did it because that's the level they were operating at. They probably went home and slept for a week, but they did it. So I think you have to be very careful that we don't go, that's what you're like.
That is who you are.
That's who you are. What we can say is that's your preference of how you like to operate. There might be occasions where you surprise me and operate in the completely opposite way. So again, we can't just automatically put people in the box and go, that's who you are.
For me, it was just total curiosity. Because I was just like, I can't see how that shows up. So like, I'm constantly trying to work out how that shows up. And they know it. They think it's fun. So it's not like a bad thing. I'm just like, but I can see it. So they're yellow. And everyone else in that part of the business is blue. So it's a very critical kind of logical environment. And this guy's in yellow. And it's like fun, happy, excitable, social, where the job is working on your own. It's really weird how that shows up. So for me, I was like trying to, but then actually when I was looking at it, I was like, do you know what, actually they're great with customers. Absolutely incredible customers. There's their yellow, right there.
They're getting them out there.
They're good with the team.
And then they can come and be introverted if they need to because they've filled their cup.
Yeah.
They've done it over there.
They never seem tired. You know, that's a yellow thing. Like, so well, I think like you show up excited.
Yes.
You show up as we're blue. You show up reserved. Normally, as a 80-20 rule, there's always 20% difference. But I think that so that was just interesting for me. But we'll go on forever.
It's fascinating. And, you know, you will find yourself meeting people, doing it on your family. You know, there's no reason you can't use this.
I've made so many people do that.
I love it. I get it.
I say made, I've invited.
I have to do it myself with my husband because he doesn't like being put in a box. So when he's like loading the dishwasher, I have to sort of ask him questions. If you went to a party and you were meeting new people, would you? Now I sort of have to do it with him by stealth because he doesn't like being put in a box. But I'm guessing his is quite hard because
it's just awareness though. It's not being put in a box. It's like you said. It doesn't mean if you looked at mine, the people that know me would probably go, yeah, there's some elements there that resonate with Michael. But that really? And I think so. You can't just say that is who you are because my personality type is probably not a great personality type to run and own a business. It's an inventor's kind of personality type.
Well, it is.
Which is...
because it's entrepreneurial.
Yeah, but there's actually a personality type called entrepreneur, which I didn't come up under, which is weird.
No, but these are just semantics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's... the most important thing you can take from it is doing it's great, but don't assume that's you and it's fixed.
Yeah.
You know, we can all flex our personality type according to the circumstances, what's needed.
Use it as a baseline.
You know, what outside influences, you know, what the circumstances require. You know, sometimes I looked after R&D as a business unit in one of my employed roles. And, you know, me going in there as an extrovert going, hey guys, how was your weekend? You know, they'd all be sat there looking at their computers thinking, don't talk to me. Don't talk to the loud lady. You know, and I learned I had to push down to and go in quite quietly and not scare them and not frighten them with social chit chat because they were very introverted people. And I had to, that's the other thing you take. You have to adapt your style to suit different environments, different circumstances, different people that you're dealing with. And that's the power of this is if you understand that stuff and you start to try it, you'll kind of see. I used to have some of those conversations that didn't go how you expected them to. You can use some of this stuff to go, look, I'm going to try and do it like this time and see if that elicits
and it's worked. Since we've used it, it does work. It does work. And it's genuine as well. So you're not trying to fabricate something, you're just trying to approach somebody at their level, which always works better.
So I mean, emotional intelligence is a huge subject. We've only touched on probably one part of it, but I think it's a good place to start. So
it's great.
We keep talking about it. Come back again.
We'll do it again. But no, thank you very much for coming, Pip.
Thanks for having me.
And you'll hear from us again soon.
Thank you.